Welcome to the podcast for Indie Film NYC, where we are helping filmmakers merge the art and business of independent filmmaking. I am your host, John Fallon. Today's podcast is an introduction to why we created Indie Film NYC and the types of things you're likely to hear when you listen to our podcast. Some podcasts will be interviews with filmmakers from around the country, and on other podcasts like today's, I'll be joined by my partner and collaborator, Chelsea Erpelding. So Chelsea, let's start this off by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you fit into the Indie Film NYC podcast.
All right. Well, my name is Chelsea, and I am from Omaha, Nebraska, and I have been working in the nonprofit field for 10 years, and I know John from way back because he and my husband went to college together. And I wanted to get involved with Indie Film NYC because I consider myself a lifetime learner, and I love to get myself into all sorts of different things. So I'm excited about this project, and I'm interested in, bringing together John's perspective and learning more about it.
I think one thing I'd like to know about you, Chelsea, is why you think getting involved with a nonprofit with film is something worth doing. What excites you about film, particularly?
Well, I just think that there are so many stories that need to be told and that should be told, and it's very important that we all have a voice, and especially using film, to talk about some issues that everybody faces or things that come up in our everyday lives. I just think it's coming from a more human service side of things. I feel that film is a great way to bring really important topics to our world. And then, of course, there's like the entertainment side of it too, which is great. But I guess for me, I like to see that everyone having their voice and being an artist and showing their point of view.
Great. All right. So what should people know about us?
Well, I would like to know, just John, who are you in a few minutes? Tell me about yourself, or tell everyone about who you are.
Sure. Well, so I've been a filmmaker for a long time, professionally since about 1998. I got into mostly editing as my first real discipline in filmmaking. But I started way back in high school shooting skateboard videos with friends. And my grandfather was a projectionist. So pretty much spent a lot of my youth inside a projection booth learning how to flip reels and watch a lot of movies through small windows. And so I've been interested in filmmaking pretty much my whole life. It's always been something that's been there for me. And then, so again, professionally, I got into editing in 1998. And I really started editing when Final Cut Pro came out. And that kind of was really the beginning of the digital home revolution of, low-budget filmmaking, being able to edit films on your desktop, in the privacy of your own home. And I was one of the first filmmakers in New York to get into Final Cut Pro. And we, there were not that many jobs, but there also weren't that many editors. And so I got lots of gigs doing those things.
Has most of your experience been in New York?
Yeah, I guess my professional experience has been in New York. I lived in Atlanta for a couple of years, but I was kind of on a hiatus from filmmaking at that time. I tried a different career path, and I realized that the draw for filmmaking was too strong, and so I came back and I got back into filmmaking. But it was kind of around when the whole market crashed and everything, so it was kind of a good time to not be filmmaking anyways. But that's also around the time where I got into directing and writing, and so kind of even though I always had that in the back of my mind to be a director, I was so focused on the editing for so long that in around 2009, 2010 is where I really started to make that push into being not just an editor, but really a filmmaker at that point. I think that was the turning point from kind of being a working professional into being a filmmaker and wanting to have a voice.
So I want you to tell us a little bit more about, like, if someone is just finding your website. So what is Indie Film NYC, and why did you start it? What was the fuel behind it?
Well, I guess what I say and what I put on the site is that our mission is for Indie Film NYC is to merge the art and business of filmmaking, the art and business of independent filmmaking. So, I guess what I mean by that is, again, over the last 15 or so years, the price for gear and equipment has really come down, and it's led to an explosion of independent filmmaking, independent films, uh, web series. There's a lot of ways to kind of get things out there, and a lot of ways to get them made cheaply. But I think the biggest problem is that a lot of filmmakers, they want to produce Hollywood level films and television shows, but they're either A, not really well versed in the filmmaking techniques, so the art of filmmaking, and they're also really not well versed in how to get their films distributed or seen by an audience. So the business side. So my thought was to take those two things, two really essential things that people need. If you want to be a filmmaker, obviously you do need to know how to, the art of filmmaking. You need to know the craft. You need to know how to make a film. And so there's techniques, there's learning, there's you can get that experience through school. One of the best ways to get that experience is to actually do the thing, to actually make the films, to write the scripts, and probably do it poorly at first, but each time you do it, you learn more. But then, it's really easy to throw a film up on, say, YouTube or something, but it's not really easy to get people to watch that film, and it's also not really easy to get paid for making that film. And so, unless you want to do it as a hobby and have a day job, and maybe you shoot things on the weekends, and which is fine. I mean, that's certainly one type of filmmaker, but if you really want to be a filmmaker who makes a living making films and telling stories, you really have to know both sides of the coin. And so with the website, what I want to do is explore those avenues that are either already paved, or more importantly, exploring the new things that are cropping up every day, because I think we're certainly not at the end of the road of where filmmaking and self-distribution needs to be. Every day there's a new platform or a new way to do it, a new crowdfunding site or something like that. So, the other thing I say on the website is that I don't have all the answers, and we don't have all the answers, but through education and sharing stories of other filmmakers, with interviews and things like that, building this community of support, then maybe we can speed up and enhance that process to become a sustainable artist.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I created the site.
Wow, that's great. It, like, what I'm hearing is you want this space to be, not only like a collaborative platform, but also information sharing and, growing as a community. So, of course, I'm like, that's kind of educational. So what's the most important piece of advice you've received as a filmmaker, and what is one piece of advice you would give to up-and-coming filmmakers?
Let's say that probably the most important piece of advice that I've gotten was to be persistent, but not stubborn. You've got to, when you want to make a film, you've got to have that drive. I mean, no one is going to champion your film from beginning to end if you, the creator, don't do it. That doesn't mean you have to do everything by yourself, but you certainly have to be the driving force. And especially with low budget independent filmmaking, there are going to be roadblocks. There are going to be, trials and tribulations that are going to seem impossible or seem to be in your way for actually getting the film done, and you have to have the persistence to figure out a way to get it done regardless of the roadblock. So like I have a kind of a story about my first kind of major short film that I wrote and directed. It's supposed to be my kind of my calling card piece, I guess. So I produced it also, and the kind of the long story short, because you can read about it in the blog post, the full story. But to kind of summarize that whole story, I set out to crowdfund. I think it was about $8,000, and I only was able to crowdfund about $800, and so way off the mark for where I thought I needed to be to get the film made. But through kind of paring down the story a little bit, figure out locations, how what resources I had that I could really kind of get for free, and shooting it in a more economical way, I ended up getting the film done regardless, and in a way that I think is of high quality. Even though I had this pretty substantial roadblock for and I also had people drop out and things like that for various reasons, but I still was able to overcome those things and get the film done. And there were multiple times where I could have easily given up because it was too hard, but I persisted.
Yeah.
I think that was the most important thing I think imparted to me from a couple fellow filmmakers, is that you have to be the one that brings the energy and the passion. And then the advice I would give to other people would be when you bring in collaborators to work with you, whether it's an actor or a cinematographer or even a PA, you have to let them take the ownership of their position and be a collaborator with them. You've brought these people in to do something for you, to help with your film. You've basically sold them on your passion and your vision of the film, and they bought in, and they're here to help you. So you need to let them perform and be take ownership of their duty and be proud of what they're doing, because that's the only way that you're going to have a film that feels cohesive and feels like it has some kind of passion behind it. And so to me, I think that's the biggest thing, is learning that collaborators are not there to do your bidding. They're there to help the project, but everybody has their own reasons for why they're there, and their own goals and their own aspirations, and so you need to allow people to fulfill their own goals as well as yours, as well as the films.
That's great advice. So I just have one final question for you today, and that is, you've been in the business for what, 20, 25 years? You said the 90s, but not which part of the 90s.
So professionally for 18 years.
Okay. So what is your vision for indie filmmaking in the next 5 years? What would you like to see happen? Where would you like to see things go? Or, you've seen a lot of changes, obviously, in those 30 years. So where do you see it going? Or where would you like to see it going?
I guess what I want to see, and I think this is one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot lately, is I would like to see indie filmmakers, through their artwork, create a shift in how people view art and view films. I think we're kind of getting closer to people being more and more comfortable watching streaming content,
Mm-hmm.
wherever that may be. But you know, obviously the huge platforms like Hulu and Netflix, you know, they're and even the newer versions of like HBO. So you have HBO Go, which you know, I can't remember the last time I watched HBO if it wasn't on my phone, which is kind of funny. I don't tend to watch HBO on the television. I watch it on my phone primarily.
Wow, it
Uh,
must be hard to watch Game of Thrones on a tiny screen.
well, I have my methods. I put it on the shelf when I do dishes, and so it's actually so close to my face that it doesn't feel small. I also have the tablet. I could throw it on the tablet too, but I think the big point is that I'm not watching it on television. I'm not watching it at
Right.
whatever 9 o'clock on Sundays or whenever it comes on, and so I think the beginning of the shift has started because of those big platforms and because of all the cord cutting and all those fun buzzwords that are going around. But still, independent films are not viewed, uh, on the regular. I guess they just people have to really find those,
Mm-hmm.
and usually the audiences are much smaller because it's kind of who the filmmakers can reach, like almost directly, to
Mm-hmm.
see their films, and then the films that seem to really explode are automatically picked up by like a Hollywood studio or something, So, for instance, there's a great little short called Lights Out that came out, I think, 3 years ago, and very simple, a 3-minute film about it's a horror film, but this monster that appears every time the lady switches the light off, and very
Yeah.
clever. It's a great little film. Immediately picked up by Hollywood studio, and now actually I think tomorrow is the feature film version of Lights Out is coming out, through in theaters.
Wow.
So, you know, I think we need to, as independent artists, figure out like how, because our our push has been to do things, to distribute digitally, but how can we create a situation where audiences are viewing, particularly independent films digitally like that? And so I'd like to see. That's what I hope to see, and I would like to see, and I think that we can be part of that shift. Both independent indie film NYC, the website, the entity. I would like us personally be involved, but filmmakers in general need to
Mm-hmm.
be involved with that and kind of shifting. It's a paradigm shift for how films are viewed, and so I think to me, like those, the the convergence of what independent filmmakers are doing and how they're getting people to watch their movies is going to be very important over the next few years.
Awesome. Well, I think that the Indie Film NYC is super exciting, and I think I'm really excited to be part of it. Is there anything else you'd like to have us know, or
Yeah,
anything
so
we maybe didn't touch on?
I think since this is the initial, this is the premiere podcast, we've talked a lot about all of our theories behind it and how you and I are going to try to champion the shift in independent filmmaking and how it's viewed, but specifically the things that we're actually going to have on the site for content. It's going to So every Wednesday we'll have a new interview from a filmmaker. And I call it indie film. We call the site Indie Film NYC, but not all the artists are going to be from New York City. It's just that this is where we're based. I think this is a great hub. I mean, I think what I want the analogy to be is that we're not Hollywood. So Indie Film NYC is kind of a service for everyone except for we're not looking for the Hollywood studio system. So we're going to get in touch with some filmmakers, some really exciting filmmakers. I have some folks who wrote a script that they're in pre-production on their film. Alex Montaldo and Jeff Musillo. They're going to be our initial interview. I have a filmmaker from Chris Neal from Ohio, who makes amazing short films that are just, they're very simple concepts, but they're, very impactful and very engaging. And, so things like that. There's a great web series. These people are based, it's called Private Sales, and they're based out of California, but they're not a studio project. But they have a exciting little web series they created. It's very drama heavy, half hour, 6 episode season. So I did an interview with them. And then we've got a lot of great blog posts that we have. I'm putting up, new blog posts. A screenwriting series, the 16 steps for writing your screenplay. There's why we need more women in filmmaking. The casting process. Lots of really good information about the nuts and bolts of filmmaking, as well as the theory behind the things that we need to pay attention to as independent filmmakers, particularly bringing voice to women and minorities, because those groups are really underrepresented in filmmaking in general, but still in independent filmmaking, those voices need to be a little stronger and heard better. So I hope that was a good introduction to who we are and what we'd like to accomplish with this podcast and our website. The Indie Film NYC podcast is available on both iTunes and Stitcher. So if this podcast is useful or interesting to you, then please subscribe to our podcast. And if you can give us a rating and a review, that would be even better, because it will help even more people find us and spread the word. And of course, please check out the other blog posts and filmmaking information that's available on our growing website, indiefilmnyc.com. Thanks for listening.